Our next author is Austin Camacho. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Actually, you could be in my chair. You've had a career in communications. Tell us about that before we get into the book Blood and Bone.
Well, when I was in the Army, I was a broadcast journalist. So I did video production. I was a DJ for a couple of years. I did a lot of TV and radio news, both writing it and being the anchor. So I did a lot of broadcast-related things, and that, in fact, is where I learned to write. I'm a print journalist, and then I'm a broadcast journalist, and now I'm a novelist.
So were you in the military, or were you a civilian in military communications?
Oh, I was U.S. Army. I was in uniform because the Army has its own broadcast people, because then they can order you to go wherever they want you to go. You couldn't have convinced a civilian to sit in Israel during the Gulf War pointing a camera at the sky watching Scuds come down at them, but I did that for a couple of weeks. That was a little exciting.
Have you turned any of that into your fiction so that you can, or is it too much to talk about the Army from the inside?
I have really kept my experiences in the military out of my writing. However, there's a slight tie-in because my fictional detective Hannibal Jones is the son of a soldier who was lost in Vietnam. So I'm able to bring that experience of the Army life into the books as background.
Your t-shirt says Hannibal Jones, so you're a good promoter as well. You have brought with you a book, Blood and Bone. That's the, what, fourth book in the series?
This is the fourth book in the Hannibal Jones mystery series. And even though they are a series, you could read them in pretty much any order. I try to make them stand alone to a certain extent, but this is the most recent publication.
Tell us about Hannibal and how he got his name. You're from Missouri, or you have a Missouri contact? Is there any Tom Sawyer thing in there?
Not even close.
Okay, what is that?
Hannibal Jones, as I say, is a private detective working in Washington, D.C. He is the son of an African-American soldier who was stationed in Germany and a German national. So Hannibal is of mixed race, and I'm able to use that to come up with a lot of interesting story elements. When Hannibal's mother was carrying him, his parents wanted him to have a strong name. They wanted to name him after a military leader. And because his mother is German, Napoleon obviously was not a choice. Alexander is a little too common. They bounced around, and then they came upon Hannibal, probably the only African military leader who is well known in history. You know, the guy who had elephants in his army and
the Alps.
Took them over the Alps, challenged the Roman legions. So it was, you know, the small army facing down the bigger army. It was a guy who used a lot of creativity. He was an African person. He just seemed to represent everything they wanted their son to be, and by the way, everything I wanted my character to represent. So it was an easy choice for me, and I hate the fact that after I made that choice, people think, oh, you named him after that cannibal guy? No, nothing to do with
You're
Thomas
referring to
Harris's
Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
DC, have you been on the inside of the district so that you know the workings of that wild town?
Well, I live in Northern Virginia, just a few miles out of the district, so I'm very familiar with the district. And one of the things that disappointed me when I read a lot of mysteries, obviously, and thrillers, a lot of stories are set in Washington, but almost all of them are involved with the federal government. There really is a city there, of an actual community, aside from congressmen and senators and so on, and that's where I wanted my stories to be. So we get into the neighborhoods of Washington. We get into the actual people who are there, who have their own problems and issues just like everywhere else.
Okay. This book particularly, what's going on in Blood and Bone?
Okay. In Blood and Bone, the story starts revolving around a teenager who's been stricken with leukemia, and he has to have a transplant. He is being attacked by his own blood and bone, which is what leukemia is, and hence the title. They've tested the entire family, no match. The last chance is the boy's father, who's been missing since the boy was born. So Hannibal is hired to find the father in time to save the son.
Oh, that's good.
Now, in the process of that search, he comes upon a variety of interesting characters, including a woman who might be the missing father's mistress, some people who might actually be related to the boy that we didn't know about. And of course, he comes upon a murder that has actually two murders that have to be solved in order for him to find the pivotal clue that will help him save the boy's life. So it's a very twisty, corkscrew mystery from beginning to end. It will keep you guessing.
Now, you're a public relations specialist for the U.S. government, is that correct?
That's correct.
So do you write at night?
When
do you write?
I write at night. I write on the weekends. I write during my lunch hour. People laugh, I suppose, but when I'm at work, I spend most of my day at a computer like everyone else. And when my lunch hour comes along, I put a CD in the machine, I put my headphones on, I pull up my document, and I have an hour that I can create. I suspect that many of my coworkers, until they see this interview, think that I work through lunch every day, when actually I'm working on my own thing. In my day job, I do write articles for military magazines and newspapers. I write news releases, but in all of that writing, I'm trapped by the facts. This is the chance to escape to a world where things happen the way I think they should, rather than the way they do. So in my novels, ultimately, the good guy comes out ahead, the bad guy gets punished, and everybody's okay at the end of the story. And I need a place for that in my life.
Right. Now, if you work inside the district and you live in Virginia, you probably have a long commute. So how do you handle that hour, hour and a half, whatever it is? Do you listen to books on tape? Do you do some writing with a little tape recorder?
No, actually, my commute is usually about 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Really?
Not that bad, but I only live 10 miles from my office, so put that in perspective. And I do spend a lot of time parked out there on the Beltway with several thousand of my closest friends, but I generally spend that time, mentally at least, working on a book. You know, the actual writing doesn't happen punching keys on a keyboard. The actual writing happens up here in your head. And I do have a recorder next to me as it happens, and I get ideas about character development and storyline, and I push and I record. In fact, in one of my, in my immediate previous book, Damaged Goods, there is a scene in which Hannibal is caught in traffic on the Beltway, which is very much taken from real life. I think I live in the vanity plate capital of the world, and I just started jotting down, or recording rather, some of the vanity plates that went by and trying to figure out what they were trying to say, and that scene turns up in the book. I thought it was kind of fun.
We've been visiting with Austin Camacho of Northern Virginia, works inside the Beltway at the Defense Department, but more importantly, and the reason he's on this show, is he's the author of the Hannibal Jones series, the most recent of which is Blood and Bone, which is about leukemia and other things, so be sure and pick it up at your nearby bookstore. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.